that, I might as well help out all my buddies like you. So it's good to see you. Good to see you, Nate.
Yeah, and this is a true statement. Like every time that I talk to Mike, he's always somewhere else in the world. Mike, how many countries have you been to now? Do you know?
Uh, Probably close to 75. And I'd be at a higher number if only the borders were open, because I was actually supposed to. First I was supposed to do a tour across Australia where I was going to be actually speaking. So I was going to be working while I was there, which I don't always do. And then from there, I was going to visit a whole bunch of South Pacific countries, but that, of course, all got kiboshed, and I'm here up in Canada, and but it's peaceful and the weather is good, so I'm not going to complain.
Beautiful, man. Beautiful. Well, Mike, what we want to pick your brain on, and so everyone knows too, Mike has become like, he's kind of my idol when it comes to lifestyle entrepreneurship. Mike has figured out how to balance this. He's a grandpa. You'd never guess it because he looks like he's like 25. He looks really good. But he's a grandpa. He manages family. He manages business, and he travels the world nonstop, except for in the midst of this whole pandemic. But he's traveling all the time. So when it comes to like lifestyle entrepreneurship, this is the guy that I strive to be someday. He's very relaxed, easygoing, but he did it by building a real estate business first, one that brings him passive income. And he's done really, really well at it. But Mike, what I want to pick your brain on right now is this whole auction thing. Like, what's about to happen? Tell us, like, shake your crystal ball for us and tell us, based on what you're seeing, are we going to see a lot of foreclosures come into the steps? What's going to happen?
Yeah, well, what's likely to happen is kind of right now we're in a bit of a bubble, and I think people are kind of still in shock, and things aren't really back to normal in so many ways. Meaning, right now there's the government handing out money to keep people afloat. People don't know, am I still going to have a job when this ends? Am I not? There's going to be so many different businesses, unfortunately, not reopening, especially like when you look at retail, when you look at restaurants. And so the government has put a moratorium. The banks can't foreclose on people right now, which is I'm grateful for. I can't even imagine what that would look like if banks were foreclosing and landlords were kicking out tenants in the middle of all this mayhem. But of course, what happens when that comes to an end, people won't be getting handouts from the government. The banks will not be lenient. Landlords, of course, have to get rid of bad tenants at some point, because you can't make your mortgage payments and pay your property taxes if you don't have income coming in. So what we're very likely to see, unless the government wants to keep printing money, which they may do, because who knows, but what we're most likely to see is a really big onslaught of pre-foreclosures, foreclosures, and things like the tax deed auction. My personal favorite auction takes place in Houston, Texas, on the first Tuesday of every month. Well, it's been shut down now for 3-4 months, and so obviously you're going to have, even if there were no new foreclosures coming down the pipeline, you're going to have a whole bunch of properties that were supposed to have gone to auction over these past few months, and they're all going to be coming down the pipeline. And so we're going to see a lot of opportunity at the auctions, and also some of the stuff that you're doing with the social media. There's also a chance to get to these people while they're in pre-foreclosure before they lose their homes, and that's also a great strategy going forward, because we can help a lot of these people before unfortunately they lose their homes to the bank and to the county.
And Mike, how would you do that? Like, okay, so we're sitting here. I know that, and hopefully you'll tell us about this. I know that you lead a lot of investors to go to foreclosure auction tours on site, and you walk them through the process. And we want to know about that while we're together. But what would you do? Like, we're all real estate investors here. What should we do to start prepping for this?
Yeah, well, the big thing is, going to these auctions, it takes a lot of education, because if you just show up, every month there's a list of all these properties that are going to go up on the auction block, and some of them are great deals, some of them are horrible deals, and some of them are really dangerous deals hidden in disguise of something that looks really good. And so what I mean by that, I do a 4-day training normally live, on tax deeds, tax liens, and a lot of times when we're in the classroom, we spend the first couple of days in the classroom. Day 3, we go driving around, looking at properties and evaluating them. And day 4, we actually go as a group to the auction. So day 1 and day 2, when we're doing our due diligence, we're looking at this list. And a lot of times these homes on paper look really, really good. And I'll give you one example. So I've seen properties that looked phenomenal. The pictures look great. The home looks beautiful. Then we go driving around, and where this beautiful home used to be, there's now smoldering ashes. And one of the challenges at these auctions is that what you see after you bought it is what you get. You can't go back after and say, oh, well, it looked really pretty in this picture, or you put a picture of the next door neighbor's house, not the right house. You don't really have
the county will do that, or like who's putting up these pictures?
the county, but they're paying somebody, you know, an hourly rate to, or maybe per home rate to go take these pictures, and they're just zipping by, taking pictures as quick as they can, getting on to the next one, and the county's not liable for what's on there. One of the challenges I had is when I was trying to figure this out, which was probably around 8-9 years ago now. I took every course I could find. I read every book on the topic. And the more I read, the more I tried to learn, the more confused I got. Meaning that, you know, I went to some courses that they actually said, oh, you don't need to go view the property, just use Google Maps, go look at the pictures online. Well, the danger to that is if you're dealing with a home that's been vacant for a few years, it could be vandalized, it could be burnt to the ground. There's a whole, and there's just so many different things that could happen. And that's just, you know, the physical part of the home. There could be problems with title. There's a whole lot of really great things about these auctions, such as the fact that the mortgages all get wiped out. And, you know, I've had students pick up single family homes for like $7,000. $7,000, yeah. my one of my clients got a home for, it was $7,200, and he kept it as a rental property. Back when he got it, was $900 a month rent. I think I was getting like $1,200 a month rent, something he paid $7,200 for. So that's a beautiful side of the equation, and I don't know where you get a property for those kind of prices anywhere else. But the negative side to the equation is that there's a lot of pitfalls. So what I did after I took these courses, and I tried to figure out what was true, what was false, because you know, some course said, oh, you can do this from the comfort of your own home, and you don't need to go drive by the property, and oh, you don't need to pull title, and you don't need to do all these. So anyway, I made myself a human guinea pig, and knowing I was going to lose some money, but that was going to be my education. And so over time, I managed to figure out, you know, what works, what doesn't work. But I'll give you another example. There was a very well publicized, and you can probably find this on, if you Google it. So somebody last year, I think it was last summer, in Fort Lauderdale, bought what they thought was a villa worth, probably, if I remember correctly, the numbers, it was probably worth 200 and something thousand, and they got it for $11,000. And they thought they got this really amazing deal. It turns out they bought a strip of land that was 100 feet long and like 3 feet wide that was separating two villas, and they thought they were actually buying a property. So the good news is all this stuff is avoidable if you have the education on how to do it. And it's all stuff that, unfortunately, I see a lot of people making really expensive mistakes at these auctions. And, you know, there's just so many different pitfalls, and that's, so my advice would be, yes, definitely get educated. Once you know how to do this properly, then the auctions are a great place to find deals. But I also want to caution people, you know, obviously you're not going to be the only person there. There is competition. So it's not like, hey, you take the class and then every month you just go pick out 10 properties that you want and make a couple $1 million. It's not get rich quick. But if you do the work and you're consistent with it, you can make a really, really good living. You know, even if you get a couple of deals a year, you can make a pretty good living, you know, buying homes for those kind of prices. Yeah,
Mike. So this $7,000 house, I want to go back to this for a minute.
Oh, you got you excited.
Yeah. You got my attention here. Okay. That $7,000 house, he bought the tax lien, I assume.
Bought the tax deed. So let me clarify. Let me define all this, because I know your viewers don't necessarily know what even a tax lien or tax deed is. So when you know, somebody gets behind on their property taxes, usually 2, 3, 4 years. It's not like they're one day late and then their home's going to go to auction. But when they get behind on their property taxes, eventually the county is going to need that money to pay for their police force, keep their schools open, etc. And so eventually they got to put these homes up on the auction block. And it does create an amazing opportunity when this happens. Now, in the interim, of course, the people are getting notices in the mail saying, hey, your home is, you know, if you don't pay up your property taxes, you're going to get a penalty, and eventually, you know, we're going to have to sell it. And people often don't take this seriously because, you know, maybe they've been getting these notices for 2 or 3 years, so they're not even taking it seriously until finally they get something saying, hey, you know, next month on the first Tuesday, your home's going for auction. So then they go scrambling to pay this off. But what a tax deed is, is basically it's an opportunity to buy, you're actually buying a piece of property. So in the case of the $7,000 home that you're really excited about, that was a tax deed. So my client bought the deed to the property. He now owns that home. It's his. He can rent it. He can live in it. He can flip it. He can do what he wants with
And
it.
did he own it on day one? He put the $7,000 down and it's his that day?
It's his that day. Now, depending on the state that you're working in, there's different rules that apply. Now, most states, if it's a tax deed state, you own that property right from day one, and you can do whatever you want with it. Now, in Texas, one of the reasons I like Texas is that it's a little bit more complicated. And one of the things that I like to teach my students is that when you kind of go, and I'm sure you teach this too, when you go the extra mile, you go just a little bit further than what other people are willing to do. That's where the better deals are. So if you go to a state where it's like, if you go to a state where it's super easy, you just buy the home and you can flip it the next day, then you're quite often competing against institutional investors that have tons and tons of money. It's very hard to compete against these guys. So what happens in Texas, it's called a redeemable deed state. What that means is that the previous owner, even though they've been given chances for like 3 years, 4 years to go save their property, they get one more chance even after you bought the home. And that, for them to redeem it, they have to give you a 25% premium over what you paid for it, plus whatever necessary repairs you put into that property. And I use the word necessary. You really need to take that very seriously, because if you, for example, decide, oh, I love this home, I'm going to put a $100,000 chandelier, that won't be considered necessary. And if the people were to redeem it, they'll give you a 25% premium on the house, and they're going to acquire your new chandelier, and you're not going to get anything for it. On the other hand, if you put it up on a new roof, you have to change the carpets to make it livable. Any of that stuff, you're going to get if you spent $10,000 rehabbing it, you're going to get $12,500 back, plus a 25% premium on whatever you paid, and that's within the first 6 months. Now, there are ways, and some of the stuff that I teach is ways that you can flip it. So if your strategy is to flip a home, buy the home for $7,000, sell it for 90, there are ways to do that. It's a little bit more complicated, which is why it keeps a lot of people away. They don't understand how to deal with that redeemable deed part. They know how to do a regular deed. They don't know how to deal with that part, especially if they're using other people's money. They don't want to wait 6 months. If they're using hard money, for example, they're not going to want to wait that 6 month period. So those are deeds. Now, the other side of the equation is you have tax liens. And what a tax lien is, and it varies from state to state, but typically you're getting what's called a TLC, which is a tax lien certificate. And you're basically getting, so let's say, Mr. Smith hasn't paid his property taxes. He gets a notice in the mail saying your taxes are due June 1st. It's $1,000. If you don't pay on time, we're going to assess a 10% penalty. So June 1st comes and goes. Mr. Smith doesn't make that payment, and now the county is owed, $1,000 plus a 10% penalty. So now they're owed $1,100. So what they do is they go and sell that certificate for $1,000 to an investor like you or me or anybody watching this. You're going to pay the $1,000. The county is going to keep bugging Mr. Smith to make payment. When he sends that $1,100, they're going to send that to you. So you put in $1,000, you're going to get $1,100 back. What eventually happens with these properties in a very small percentage of cases is Mr. Smith never ends up paying. And then it becomes, there's a certain redemption period. At that time, Mr. Smith now cannot go and just pay the property taxes. You can actually foreclose, take the property. And so if you ever saw those late night infomercials back in the 80s and 90s,
yeah,
somebody bought a home for $500. That's often a tax lien where, they put in a very small amount of money. The thing I like to caution my students on when it comes to tax liens is often if you're going to get that property for this really small amount, like $500, quite often there's not always, but quite often there's going to be something wrong with it. And to give you an example, imagine you got you bought a lien on a piece of land, and this land, unbeknownst to you, was contaminated, and there's like a $50,000 bill to make that land up to code again and make it safe. Now if you foreclose on that property, it now becomes your liability to fix that. So the thing that you got for $500 might cost you another $50,000, and it may or may not still be a good deal. So you have to be really careful. You still have to do your due diligence, whether you're doing liens or deeds, in order to make a profit at it and not get stuck in some of the traps. But once you know what you're doing, it can be a very lucrative business.
Dude, this stuff is killer. This is gold. Okay. And I want to open this up too. We've got some folks, we're streaming right now back to our Facebook group. So there's some people that are watching. And there's also some of our elite students, some folks that jumped on. They were early adopters on a podcast that I launched and whatnot. And they're here live with us too. So Diana, Jason, Jordan, if you've got questions that you want to send over, or if you want to talk, we can turn on your mic too. And we can talk to Mike. Mike's a super approachable guy, one of the most down to earth, successful real estate investors that I've ever met. And that's why I like him, frankly. But you guys can join in the conversation with us as well. Mike, so what else? You taught me this little thing the other day, like you got my curiosity wheels circling on overages. Overages. Nobody talks about overages in this whole tax lien or tax deed process. What are they, and how do we take advantage of these?
Yeah, overages is a really cool strategy that I didn't know. You know, I'd heard bits and pieces about it, and I didn't know that much about it till a couple of years ago when I actually, by coincidence, had a mutual friend introduce me to somebody who's an expert at this. And so anyway, what an overage is when you go to these auctions. Let's say opening bid is $5,000, and let's say the property sells for $50,000. So that first $5,000, that belongs to the county fair and square. That money is for the back taxes owing, and that additional $45,000 actually does not belong to the county. The county's not really supposed to make a profit in theory on these homes. So that actual additional $45,000 is called an overage, and that actually belongs to the previous homeowner. And most previous homeowners have no idea that there's money owed to them. The county makes very little, if any, attempt to contact these people because the county wants to keep it in their little slush fund. And so an amazing strategy that's a great win-win is to track down the homeowner and say, listen, I know somebody who owes you $45,000. If you're willing to give me, power of attorney and let me help you retrieve it, if you give me, whatever you negotiate, 20%, 30%, 40% of it, I'm going to get you this money. So imagine you're in the homeowner's position where you just lost your home. You're probably in pretty bad financial shape, and all of a sudden somebody comes to you and says, hey, I can get you $45,000. It's going to get your attention. Some people will actually be skeptical, even though this is all true. They'll be skeptical when you approach them. So a buddy of mine who actually does this strategy, he actually gives them a 10% of it up front. So if he says he can get them $45,000, and let's say he's taking half of it just for easy numbers, he'll give them, $2,250 for 10% just in good faith, and then he'll get them the other money later on. So it's a really great win-win strategy. And one of the things that I love to teach is that there's so many different ways to monetize these auctions. It's not, most people just think, oh, I'll go to the auction, I'll bid, I'll get a property. That's great. You can do that. But there's also, every month when they publish the list of the homes that are going for sale, that's a list of people that are in trouble. And so that list is gold in terms of, going and talking to them before they lose a home, and going and creating options for them. And so it's, for me, if I was going to do this full time, these days I'm I wouldn't say lazy, but I have teams that do a lot of different things for me. And we have so many things on the go. I don't need more on my plate. But if I was starting fresh, I would go, come up with a marketing campaign towards the pre-foreclosures before they lose a home. Then the ones you can't help and can't get a hold of, then I would go to the auctions and pick up those properties for pennies on the dollar. And then the stuff, if whether you win or lose, there's going to be a whole bunch of people owed money with these overages. Then I would go and skip trace these people and get in contact with them and help them recover that money and then get a piece of it. So there's so many different ways that you can monetize this. And it's not what most people think. Like I said, most people just think, oh, you go to the auction and you bid and that's it. And that's great. If that's all you did, that's great. But the auction in Houston, which is my favorite one, takes place once a month. And the amount of research you need to do, I don't recommend, if you're just doing auction work, if you weren't doing the pre-foreclosure stuff, I wouldn't even look at the list till probably like 3 or 4 days before the auction, because a lot of these people, when they get a notice in the mail after all these years saying, hey, your home is going up on the auction block, suddenly they get very serious, and it's very humbling, and they go ask their friends for money, they go ask their relatives for money, people they wouldn't have gone to before. Now they've lost, before they were too proud, now it's become very real to them. And so a lot of these properties, as the month progresses, will get canceled. Some of them because investors like us are doing pre-foreclosure with them and bailing them out before it gets to the auction. And so if I was just doing the auction, that's going to take up maybe 3 days. You're going to spend maybe, on the list 4 or 5 hours for the entire month working that. So you've got 25 other days where you could be doing other stuff. And so I would never just say, hey, let's just do the auction. We'll work for 4 hours a month, and then the rest of the time just sit back, because there's going to be auctions where you get nothing. You're going to come home empty-handed, and then you've got nothing to do. So I'd be doing your social media stuff to attract distressed buyers. I'd be going after pre-foreclosures. I'd be doing a whole bunch of other strategies for the rest of the month, especially for people that want to do this full time. If you want this to be your career, you want to always be, feeding your funnels, feeding your pipeline with deals.
Yeah, that's fantastic. Fantastic. Okay, we've got a couple chats over here. I'm just going to read this out to you. This is from Diana. There are some properties that say occupied. If they pay a lien, do you have to foreclose or evict to get them out?
You don't, if it's a lien, you don't have to foreclose. You're not obligated to, but you're probably not going to get, you could negotiate with the homeowner at some point, depending, and this depends on the county, by the way, because in some places it's actually against the law for you to contact the homeowner. It's all done, in some places, all done by the county, so you're not even allowed to approach them. In other places where it is legal, you could potentially work out a deal with these people, but usually liens are for very, very small amounts of money. And, quite often if they're occupied, it's more likely to be a tenant than a homeowner. If let's say, you're getting a lien for $500, if somebody can't pay their $500 and they're about to lose their home, usually there's either something really wrong with it, or it's tenant occupied and they're collecting rent while they're not making their property tax, and probably not their mortgage payment either. So in theory, in some places you can. To be honest, I'm a much bigger fan of tax deeds and tax liens. And the reason for that is if you're buying, let's say, a $500 lien, even if you get 20% on it, it's a very small amount of money. It's better than leaving in the bank for sure. But if you get to the part where you're going to actually have ownership of this property, you have to do a lot of due diligence. And if let's say 98% of the time you're just going to get this, interest payment, you're going to get, $100 or $500, you're going to get a relatively small amount of money. And for you to do the due diligence can be very, very expensive. So it makes it a little bit cost prohibitive, unless you're doing it close to home, where you can actually drive the properties yourself. So I'd much rather do a deed where I'm going to get a much bigger payday on it. And with those deals, you can definitely negotiate with homeowners at times. Most of the homes will be vacant, but the ones where the people are still there, there's different ways to negotiate with them. But yeah, for liens, when it's a very small amount, there's almost always going to be a problem with the property, because it's usually such a small amount.
Got it. So I used to buy a lot of foreclosures, in like bank foreclosures. They went through the whole REO process. They were taken back from the bank, and I bought some pre-foreclosures, but it was always very risky because in at least the states that I was doing it, there was a long redemption period. Meaning, like, even though I might buy the rights for it, the homeowner can come back and redeem, and then all of the work that I put into it kind of goes to waste. I get my money back, but I wouldn't make anything. Is there a redemption period on tax deeds?
Only in a few states, one of them being Texas, one of them being Georgia, I think Connecticut, if I remember correctly. In any case, there's a few states where there's a redemption period, and normally I don't like to go. You have to know when you're getting to a place where there's a redemption period, you have to know exactly what your rights are and what the previous homeowner's rights are. And in Texas, I really like it because the previous homeowner doesn't have any rights except for the right of redemption. And they have to give you a 25% premium, not just on what you paid for the property, but also on the work that you did. And so you'll never be out of pocket, as long as, unless you didn't do your due diligence properly, but you'll never be out of pocket because the tenant came back to redeem. Now, if you go to to Georgia, for example, they have a 1-year redemption period. And my understanding is during that year, you can't do anything to the property. You can't rent it. You can't live in it. You can't rehab it. You can't do anything with the property. That's my understanding. I've never done it there. So verify that if you're thinking of doing tax deeds there. And so I don't, even
Hi, this is Diana. Can I help you?
Oh, Diana. Sorry, did you have a question or?
I think it was a mistake. You're good.
Oh, okay, no problem. Yeah, so if you're in Georgia, and I love Georgia for other things. That's where my turnkey operation is, and I love regular foreclosures, but I don't like doing tax deeds there because I don't want to invest money, have to wait a whole year before I get any kind of return on it. And it just ties up your cash. So you have to know, if you're in a state where it's a redeemable deed, you have to know what the rights are of the previous owner and what you're allowed to do during that redemption period. So in Texas, it's very, there's a lot of things you can do with that property. You could put a renter in there and start collecting rent right from day one. If the homeowner happens to still be there, which usually they're not, but if they are, you could potentially charge them rent. And so there's a lot of different things that you can do, a lot of different exit strategies in Texas, whereas in Georgia, exact opposite, nothing for a full year that you can do. By the way, there, it's a 20% redemption. So if the homeowner wants to buy it back off you, they have to give you a 20% premium. But a lot of times nothing happens. You can't get a hold of the owner, and in the meantime, the home is just sitting there in limbo. And of course, when you have a home sitting vacant for a whole year, who knows what's going to happen? You got to keep it insured. You got to pay for utilities. So you've got to be really careful to know exactly what you're getting yourself into before you jump in. But that's why, for me, I don't invest. I'm Canadian, but I don't invest up in Canada because the numbers don't make sense to me. So I always recommend to people go where things are the most favorable for you. And these days, a lot of stuff can be done online. And for the stuff that can't be, you can build a team. Like I've got people in Houston that go around taking pictures and videos of the properties and the streetscape for myself and also for my students. And I've got somebody who goes to the auction on behalf of myself and my students every month. So a lot of stuff can be done remotely if you have a team and you have the right systems in place. So you don't. At least what I teach is that you don't necessarily have to invest close to home. Invest where the best returns are and where things are the most favorable for you.
Mike, on the Canadian note, we do have some folks that are part of this program that they're from Canada. Can we still do wholesaling in Canada? Like, could I assign contracts if I get a good deal off market? Could I assign it to another investor?
Absolutely, yeah. So when I talk about I don't like doing deals up here in Canada, that's because I'm mostly a buy and hold investor myself. And the home prices are ridiculous in pretty much every major Canadian city. The home prices are very, very high, and rent relative to purchase price is very low. So I get way better returns in Atlanta, and that's why I take my clients who want to buy turnkey properties there. Also, the things like tax deed auctions, there's very little of that in Canada. There's very, we don't see a lot of that. Homes going for auction. Usually there's so few that there's so much competition that they go above market value. So it makes no sense. But if you're a wholesaler, absolutely, you can be doing that in Canada. We can be doing, flips. If you can get a good deal, you can do flips. So not a great place to buy and hold, but yeah, some of the strategies that you're teaching and attracting people on social media and looking for deals, that can definitely be done in Canada.
What about double close? Is there a law or restrictions to buying and selling same day where you actually close on it and sell it to somebody else?
That's going to vary from province to province. So I would talk to a lawyer in your local market, mm-hmm. And there's different ways. I know people doing double closes or there's writing it up in certain ways. A lot of times if you call it one thing, you can't do it. You change it slightly, and now all of a sudden you can do it. So for example, in places where you can't do rent to own, and Texas is one of them, by the way, at least in Houston. I don't know if that's statewide, but in Houston, you can't do a rent to own. But if you do a rental contract and then you do a totally separate contract that gives somebody an option to purchase the property, then it's fine. You do one contract, call it rent to own, it's not fine. So sometimes it's working with, getting a professional to help you write the contracts properly and go through it with you and showing you the proper way to do it. So just because you've heard, hey, this isn't legal or can't be done here, that doesn't necessarily mean it's a case. It means that if you do things the traditional way that everybody else is doing, then you can't. And if you tweak it a little bit, sometimes you can. And so I'd always get a lawyer to look at the contracts and tell them exactly what you're looking to do. And then when you find a good one, just go to town and just send the deals to them, and they'll know how to close it for you.
Absolutely. Okay, Mike. I know I don't want to put you on the spot, and I don't want to take too much of your time, but could you give us maybe just a couple minutes about why Atlanta for turnkeys, and if we want to know more about the turnkey operation there, like give us some of those goods?
Absolutely. So I'll tell you how I pick a market. So I'll give you a little bit of education into my thinking when we go into a market. I'm not looking to buy one or two homes. To give you an idea, we've been in Atlanta now for close to 8 years, and we've done around 1,000. We sold around 1,000 homes to investors around the world. And so I definitely don't throw a dart at a map and pick that market. There's things that I look at very specifically. And the first thing that I look at, and most people don't even think of this, is I look at how landlord or tenant friendly is that market. And so what I mean by that, if you're in California, I love visiting California, but I will never buy a rental property there, because if you get a bad tenant, it can take you, I have a friend, it took him almost 18 months to get rid of a bad tenant. And
Wow.
so, yeah, when the laws are very much in favor of tenants, because I think there's a course out there for tenants on how to not get kicked out of the house. So they will make your life very, very miserable. And I don't know about you, but I've never once had my bank call me up and say, "Hey, Mike, I hear you're having a hard time collecting rent. Yeah, just pay your mortgage whenever. We don't care. Whenever you get rent, pay us." I've never once had that happen. If I did have that happen, then maybe I would consider California. And I'm not just picking on California and New York. There's a whole lot of places that are very, very landlord friendly, or sorry, very tenant friendly.
Yeah.
And so even if on paper the numbers look great, your chance of collecting rent in a place where the laws are very much slanted towards your tenant, you're going to be in big trouble at some point. All it takes is one tenant, and they could just wipe out your life savings. So that's the number one thing I'm going to look at. I won't touch places that are very, very, extremely in favor of the tenant. Number two is I always want to find a market that is ripe for appreciation. And so, what causes appreciation is obviously, population growth is a simple supply and demand. If the population is going to grow, like right now, post-COVID, what I believe we're going to see is a lot of people moving away from very expensive, high cost of living places. So for example, imagine you wake up, you're in Manhattan in your one bedroom apartment that's $4,000 or $5,000 a month, and your job is no longer there. You're not going to be able to sustain that lifestyle for very long unless you have a lot of savings. You're going to burn through that really, really quick. So if you contrast that, you could be living in a beautiful 3-bedroom home in a nice neighborhood in Atlanta for $1,100, $1,200, and the cost of living is very low there. Real estate, to give you an idea, the turnkey homes that I sell start at $70,000 already fixed up, already with a tenant in place. So
Wow.
yeah, so that's not even a down payment in some of these markets. So people are going to move to places that have work for them, where there's employment, where the cost of living is affordable, and places that are desirable. And so the number two thing I'm looking at is where, I want to be in the path of progress. I want to go to places before other people figure out they want to go there. And so, Georgia, one of the things I love about Georgia, even though I don't like it for tax deeds, I do love the fact that it's extremely, not just landlord friendly, but it's very business friendly. And so they have a lot of tax incentives for businesses to open up their offices there. So it's head office to Coca-Cola, Turner Broadcasting, Home Depot, Delta Airlines. The list goes on and on and on of companies with head offices there, just because it's very, very low tax rate for them. And the government knows, hey, if we make it favorable for businesses to move here, they're going to hire a whole bunch of people, and we'll tax those people. So basically, it's very, very, there's a lot of jobs. The economy is really good. And so imagine, and the other thing that's really important is it's diversified. So you go to one industry towns. Where I am right now, I'm in Calgary. For those of you who don't know, Calgary is an oil town. We are definitely going to we were already feeling the pinch before COVID, and now it's, downtown Calgary, there's a whole lot of commercial real estate sitting empty, a lot of office buildings where, oil people used to be sitting at those desks. They're not there anymore. So when you're in a one industry town, you're doing good. You're good as long as that industry is doing well. When you're in a multiple industry town, if Delta Airlines is probably going to be struggling for a little bit. If they had to lay off people, well, people can go work at Coca-Cola, or then go work at Home Depot, or there's so many different industries there. So very, very business friendly, which attracts people all the time. They also get a lot of people that come there whenever, hurricane season, people get really sick of hurricanes in Florida and the Carolinas. And, Atlanta quite often is a beneficiary of some of these people that just get sick of evacuating. So the population is growing, business is good. And what that means is that, at some point, people are going to realize that this market is way underpriced for how good the economy is and what's going on there. And that's when you get your booms all of a sudden. And this is how I personally created my wealth. I happened to be in the right markets at the right time. I got in when they were cheap. The markets rose up. And the thing that I do differently than most people is at some point Atlanta is not going to make sense. And because I don't invest where I live, I invest where where I can make the best returns. At some point, I'm going to move to a different market, and I'm going to build a team there. I'm going to find another opportunity. And my customers, my clients who have bought homes in Atlanta through me, when the time comes and those properties rise up, they're going to be able to sell those homes and then hopefully be able to buy 2 in the next market. That's what I did when I went from Phoenix to Atlanta. Every home I sold in Phoenix, I could purchase 2 in Atlanta, and I doubled my portfolio without taking more money out of my pocket. So that's why that is also the second step. And the third step is what most people go to first, and that's they look at the cash flow. They look at, well, how much money am I going to get every month? If I buy $100,000 property, how much will I put into my pocket every month? And if you go to that first and you skip the other 2 things, well, you might get great in what I call paper returns. On paper, it looks really, really good. If the numbers made sense in California, which they don't really any market in California that I'm aware of, but even if they did, if you can only collect rent 2 or 3 months and then your tenant decides they're not going to pay and they stay there for a year without paying you, that return is not going to look anything like what you were expecting. So very, very important before you go straight to your cash flow is looking at those first 2 things. Then cash flow is very important after that. Once you've got a great market in terms of being favorable for getting rid of bad tenants, and you're in the path of progress where things are going to grow and your homes are going to rise up in value, you're going to make money that way. Then of course you want to be sustainable, so you want to have cash flow coming in every month. So you want to get to a good market, and Atlanta's a good market for that as well. And so those are the things I look at when I'm picking a market, and that's why I love Atlanta. And I'm going to be actually sad the day that I've got to switch markets, because that has been, of all the markets I've been in, it's been my favorite market for buying and holding. Now for flipping, I love Houston because I love those auctions and the pre-foreclosures, the foreclosures, the overage list is I haven't really done. I have some of my students have done overages. I haven't actually tried them yet, but if I was going to be getting into that sort of thing, that's one of the markets I'd look at. I'm sure you know a whole bunch more as well. But those are some of my criteria that I look at.
Mike, dude, you are dropping like mad wisdom on everybody. So we've learned not only like the best of the best on auctions, but we've also learned how to pick a market for turnkey rentals. Like, I know that you're a wealth of knowledge and people are going to want to follow up with you and get more. How do we get a hold of you? What's the best way?
Yeah, best bet is you can actually email me info@mikewolfmastery.com. So it's wolf just like the animal. Info@mikewolfmastery.com. My website is mikewolfmastery.com, obviously. And yeah, I'd be happy to answer any questions anybody's got anytime. Because I don't know if you noticed, but I kind of like talking about real estate. I guess I could say.
I'd say you just went on a roll for 41 minutes of nonstop, like drinking from a fire hydrant worth of knowledge. Like, you're good, man. You're really good.
I get excited. I'm very passionate. I've been doing this for 31 years. I'm still passionate about it, and I love it. And it makes me cringe when I hear people's horror stories. Like I hear about some of the mistakes, or they got involved with the wrong people, or they have a bad taste in their mouth about real estate investing. And I just know how good it's been to me. I know how good it's been to you and a lot of my other friends. And it drives me crazy when I see somebody who gets knocked out of the business because of either a simple mistake or just, I don't know. So some of the stuff that I know back when I first started, I'm sure you had the same experiences. Trust me, I made every mistake in the book, and I know how much it hurts. And there were times that I did want to get out of the industry, and I'm so glad I didn't. So now that I kind of figured out a few things, I'm very passionate about it, and I love to help other people succeed at it, as do you.
Yeah, Mike, dude, you are so great and gracious for coming and sharing like this today. And for our SMB family members, feel free to reach out to Mike. Mike is like one of the most passive guys I've met, like totally friendly, likes to talk to people about real estate. So if you've got questions about either the auction process or about turnkey rentals, this is the guy that I would go to. And whenever you do put the date on the calendar, Mike, I will be the first person signing up with you for your next auction tour. So I know that you schedule, I don't know if you've got a date yet, but schedules are up in the air.
I'm hoping to do the first week of October. Of course, a few things have to happen, such as the ability to put crowds together again and in a room. But I'm optimistically hoping for October. Maybe if things go really well, maybe September. But I just don't want to put anything on the calendar. I am doing a 3-day training this week, this weekend, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and I'm going to be teaching. I'll be touching on tax deeds. that's a 4-day course in itself. So I obviously can't teach that and other strategies in 3 days. I'm going to be touching on it. But I'm going to be talking a lot about things like pre-foreclosures and wholesaling and flipping and overages and bringing in a whole bunch of guest speakers, including yourself. So, if anybody wants to sign up for that, it's $997, and I give a money back guarantee. You get a 10-day one. If you don't think it's the second best training after Nate's that you've ever attended, gladly refund your money. So if anybody's interested in that, just email me at that email address and let me know that you saw me on Nate's program. Matter of fact, I'm going to give the friends and family discount to your people. So I'll give you 25% off. So just say you saw me at Nate's and you want that discount. Like I said, there's no risk. If you don't like it, and I think Nate's going to be speaking on Friday. So if you don't like him and you want you're going to love it. You're going to love all the guest speakers. So if it's for whatever reason you don't think you don't think you can do these strategies, or you just ask for money back and I'll cheerfully refund it.
Mike, this is awesome, man. So again, I think it's info@mikewolfmastery.com. Is that right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Bet.
And I'll add that to the comments of the video after this too. Oh, Mike, dude, thank you so much. Appreciate you. God bless you, man. And I'm going to, after we hang up the Zoom call, I'll give you a call too so that we can map out some more stuff for Friday. Okay.
Sounds great. And everybody stay safe. And thanks so much for having me, Nate. It's been a pleasure to be here.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Thanks, Mike. Bye-bye.